very white sports teams.
It's not very diversified.
Not very diverse at all. Like, our football team is probably our most diverse. Our football and men's soccer team are probably our most diverse. I can count on, I think there's maybe 1 to 2 black players on the basketball team, men's basketball team every year. The last 5 years, there hasn't been 1 black girl on the women's varsity basketball
Really?
team.
And I mean, you played soccer, so was this, and you did track, so this was.
I played soccer. There was 1 black girl when I was on the team, and now last year there were 2, and this year there'll be 1. But the men's soccer team has always been very diverse. They've always had like 5 or 6 black kids on the team. But the track team, for as many kids, there's like 150 kids on the track team, and I'd say there's probably like 8 or 9 black kids on the track team.
That's strikingly
Maybe
low.
10 or, Basketball team, it's 1 to 2 across the program, men and women. And these are sports that you consider, you would think you'd have more black people. I think there's 1 or 2 black swimmers, no tennis.
What about Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans?
Yeah, and I don't think that I equate diversity with black people, because that's not what I'm doing, but I'm just saying from my experience and what I pick on mostly. Asian Americans don't have a huge presence in terms of our athletic programs. I'm trying to even think. There was 1 on the men's soccer team and 1 Asian American on the women's soccer team this year. There's actually 1 on the men's varsity basketball team as well. None on swimming, none on skiing or squash or tennis. There's 1 on the volleyball team, none on basketball. In terms of Latino, they're probably the least represented. Probably the least represented on school campus, period, in general. There's not a huge Hispanic population.
Is there an outreach to them? ESL classes, perhaps, for people who are maybe first generation?
I mean, there's no ESL class. I mean, this is college. You don't really have ESL. We have, like, tutoring. I think for kids that English isn't their first language, there is an English, like a very basic English class. It's like a 101 or something that a lot of them take. I'm a writing tutor, and we do special tutoring with people who English isn't their first language. There is a very strong, like, Dominican and Puerto Rican community. So the Latino community that is present on campus comes from, like, the Caribbean islands. There's not a lot from, like, South America or Mexico. So there's a lot of Puerto Ricans, a lot of Dominicans, a lot of people straight from, I'm not talking like their mom or dad, straight from Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, which kind of makes sense because those people with money, the parents have enough money to send them over, that sort of thing. Our Asian population is very, very, very large, but I don't think that's necessarily unusual for
school ranked as high as yours.
Well, not just, or in general, and just in higher education, I don't think that's unusual. But and then there's the misconceptions, though, that the Asian Americans are really smart and they excel, and those are all myths in terms of and you learned that in high school as well.
Yeah, stereotypes basically.
But there's a fair amount of kids represented from Africa, a lot of Kenyans, Nigerians, and Zimbabweans. Trying to think. Europe, a lot of Eastern Europeans. But in terms of religion, Williams is a very, 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 and I reiterate, very liberal school. So you don't get a huge, burgeoning, Christian community in terms of people being out about it. I'm a part of the Williams Christian Fellowship. It's very small considering, Williams is a very small school. We're less than 3,000. But the Christian community in terms of being very external, it's getting bigger. It's grown since I've been a freshman.
You even started a magazine.
Oh, Matt, so funny you would ask.
Well, no, I think it's a very cool magazine. I honestly do.
Well, yeah, this new magazine on campus we started last year. The founding editor-in-chief, it's called Telos, which in Greek means purpose. And it says Telos, a Williams Journal of Christian Discourse. The Day Foundation, which is an organization sponsored by this man who was a multimillionaire and really wanted to help students in terms of just journalism and literature. So his foundation sponsors new emerging literature on different campuses. And we were approached last year to see if we wanted to start one, and myself and a few other people jumped on board. There's one at Stanford, there's one at BU, there's one at UMass Amherst, UMass Loyal, Amherst has one, I think Brown has one, Penn has one, Baylor. So now Williams does, and our first issue came out in May this year. The theme was New Beginnings on the campus on the horizon. We had, 9 articles and 3 pieces of original art, 2 poetry, and we just had like an open call, anyone who wanted to submit something, and went through a long editing process, and I thought it turned out pretty well. We had a great response from kids on campus, and it's scary actually being, someone who wants to just show their faith on campus, because people are so liberal and people are so quick to just shut you down in class, outside of class. Not that people don't have open minds, but they're so liberal, they just want to reject anything that's
so
structured.
They become so open-minded that they're actually closed-minded.
Exactly. But I had so many people come up to me that I know don't have a working relationship with God, and they were just, I think the look of the magazine was enough to make people just want to pick it up. And, people read articles and people were impressed with it, and so it was a real blessing. God was good. And so next year we'll have 2 issues, one in the fall and one in the spring. But, so the Christian community is not that large. We have a pretty, sizable Muslim community, very big Jewish community. The Jewish community and the Christian community try to do a lot of overlapping events. The JRC, the Jewish building, they have a huge potluck dinner, and they invite anyone to come, and it's like prayer and potluck.
Nice.
In the last few years, when that racial incident happened, the religious community really felt like they needed to step up and do something. So we hosted 2 interfaith talks, and they were at the Jewish Community Center, and it was the Muslim community, Hindu, Christian, Jewish, Catholic. I think some Wiccans were there. Not quite sure. Anyway, basically it was just open conversation over food. We had different conversational pieces passed around, and it was just a way for people to open up and realize that, it's okay to have dialogue about it.
So the last question I want to ask you, our website is Minority Recruit Online, and it's designed to help high school students find diversity-friendly colleges, college students find diversity-friendly internships, co-ops, clubs, and of course, once they've gotten out of college, find a diversity-friendly place of work. So I just wanted to know from you, do you think this site is relevant? Do you think it's something that we could use? What do you think? Do you think this is a good thing to do? Do you think this is something useful, a useful tool?
I think it's very useful. I think it definitely has a place in society, especially today. My only inquiry and just sort of hearing about it is being very specific about the way you define or, promote diversity. Because even at Williams, I noticed there's a lot of different ways people define diversity. Some people are very turned off by just the word. I know there's a lot of kids, white or black, but mostly white, that are like, well, the word diversity in itself is very divisive. When I hear that, it just makes me, people are so pressing about diversity. I think people should just let it happen naturally, and having all these clubs just makes people more divisive. I tend to disagree. So I think a site like this really opens up the dialogue, where people realize that diversity is essential to, first of all, our country, the world, and whatnot. And so I think this site would be an amazing outlet and asset, especially to high school students going into college, because I know for me, diversity was a really big thing that I looked at when looking at higher education.